That actually sets up the theme for our talk. We'll pick up on a theme from Rob's talk, which is be clear about your theme. And a big part of our theme is Milan and I are in very different places in our life. He's 33, I'm 64. We're different places in our career. And it's really this talk, punching above our weight, really refers to Milan's company NORDEUS and how they really, as a small game company in Belgrade, Serbia, completely punch above their weight to create a globally competitive company that's able to pull in great talent from all over the world. They really do punch above their weight. So our talk's about that, but it's really about this relationship that we've been able to find that each leverages what we're looking for. By the way, I'm going to talk about a taboo today. I'm going to talk about a taboo, which is in our industry, you're always busy. You meet somebody, hi, are you busy? Oh my God, I'm so busy. I don't have time for anything. How about you? Oh, I'm crazy busy. I've never heard anybody say, I'm actually not that busy. Well, I'm actually not that busy, and it's intentional. I'm at a stage in my career where here's the taboo. I've chosen not to work full time. My day job is being retired. That is something people very rarely talk about, but I thought, it might be interesting for someone to talk about how they navigate that. The leverage I look for is how I leverage all the experience I've had with bright young people and companies who are actually doing the hard work to make stuff happen that I'm personally not ready to sign up for anymore. How I can leverage that. In turn, Milan is leveraging talent.
Yeah, so just to kind of continue on Glenn's story, the first time I spoke to him, it was so funny. So he said, Milan, I'm really not looking for work anymore. I'm happy being retired. That's my full-time job. So you need to respect that. And all you get is, being number two. So, okay, I can settle for that. So he said, to his wife, even, Maria, who's in the audience. So you were always first in my heart, but always last in my schedule. So we're going to reverse that. So I really look at Glenn as somebody I want to grow up being eventually. So I want to grow up not needing to work really, but I still feel there's a few more years left. Yeah, just looking at the audience, honestly, we're the only not keynote this morning. I like to refer to that as we're a palate cleanser between a few amazing talks. In the audience, I've met people who have more SIGGRAPH papers published than I have years of my life. I've met people who have more Academy Awards than I have years of experience. So there's, what can I tell you guys? Well, what I've decided to tell you guys, and then it's actually our common story just told from two different angles, is, how can actually creativity be born anywhere? And more interesting to me is how success can be born anywhere. Serbia is a place where I was born, the place where I founded my company. It's not really close to any of the major creative hubs, and we still made something successful. So I thought that would be an inspirational story for many of you in the room, especially because Turin is trying to build something similar. So I guess, at least, there's some inspiration. I hope this is going to be a light talk, not to kind of overwhelm you with all the amazing keynotes before us and after us. So I guess you'll enjoy our small talk.
Yes, thank you. And we had a lot of explosions, but after seeing Rob talk, we decided just before the talk, we took all those out of our presentation. So we're not showing the explosions this time. So I'm just going to tell a quick story of my entire life and how it led to what I'm doing here, because there's a few key lessons. One was when we started PDI, there was 3 of us. We were all in our 20s. You'll hear this story again from Milan. But we were all in our 20s, 3 guys who had this dream of creating an animation company. And what almost everybody who's been in a growing organization learns is as the organization starts to get bigger and starts to get bigger and starts to get bigger. This is PDI when it became DreamWorks Animation. It peaked at around 700 people before it was shut down. But the thing you realize as organizations grow, whatever the technology and whatever the creative issues, the big issues almost always end up being people issues. How you create an environment where people can do the best work of their lives. They love doing the best work of their lives. They feel supported and respected for doing the best work of their lives. you can get that culture that you create of creative productivity is really the big and the hard problem that everything else hangs off of it. So that was one lesson I learned in my life. In 1995, I left PDI to become CEO of DreamWorks Interactive, and we did a lot of different video games. We were a joint venture between DreamWorks and Microsoft. And as often happens in the game business, you realize it's only the few titles that are really hits that really drive the business. So for us, it was the Medal of Honor franchise. And I learned something really important on that franchise. The very first Medal of Honor game was for the PlayStation. And we had about 25 people on that team. It was a huge hit. We realized we had the potential of a major franchise on our hands. So we went for the second title, which was on the PlayStation 2. And that had about 50 people on the team. You would think doubling the team size will double the energy, double the noise, double the kind of creative fireworks that go around any worthwhile creative project. But in fact, things got very quiet. And what I realized was happening was with the bigger team and it was a more complex game because it was a next generation platform from the PlayStation 1, is that people started getting a lot more serious and professional. And they were documenting more, and they were being a lot more careful about the design documents. And people were handing pieces of paper around. There was a design document that was being built up that was hundreds of pages long. And I just thought, I see people in their offices going through piles of papers. That does not feel like the creative process to me. And I asked the team, why don't I hear you arguing more? And it's like, and I said, look, it's not that I want you to dislike each other or argue, but I do not believe that anything creatively worthwhile is ever created without creative tension and without passionate, different points of view working things out. I wanted to hear laughter. I wanted to hear argument. I just wanted some energy. And it wasn't just that I wanted the noise. I just didn't believe something worthwhile could come without that level of engagement and interaction. So at this point, I take a quick digression. I'm going to talk about my wife. My wife, who's in the audience here, I'm coming back to the main story, I promise you. She's a painter. She does these wonderful paintings of some realistic, some very abstract. She's a painter, and about probably 30 years ago now, she brought me to a program called the Painting Experience. It was a weekend workshop where you go and you're supposed to just let your inner demons or angels, whatever they are, out, right from your heart to the canvas. It was supposed to be your innermost feelings come right out in the paint. And like Rob opened his talk, I was staring at a blank canvas. It's like, I don't know my innermost heart. I don't know how to put it in paint. I got stuck. So what they did at the Painting Experience is they brought me into a room with this big sandbox and these floor-to-ceiling toys. And they said, if you're stuck on your painting, just work in there for a while. And all of a sudden, everything flowed. It was so easy just to grab things and to start playing around and having fun with it. And I wasn't worried about the creative process anymore as much as I was just responding to things and having fun. And it was an incredibly valuable creative experience for me. I found out years later it's called Jungian sandbox therapy. There's a whole community of therapists worldwide who do this with their clients. And you can see the kinds of toys. They had different themes on different shelves. This is just from Google Images. I mean, these are different sandboxes all over the world for this. So taking that as an inspiration, I thought, is there a way I can use that experience to help the Medal of Honor team as it grows? And I asked them to build a sandbox. And it took a little bit of convincing, but eventually we built this sandbox for the Medal of Honor team. And it was literally, as you can see, it was just a sandbox. We got wooden blocks and army toys. And I asked the team, I said, look, just humor me. Spend one day working in the sandbox, designing a level for Medal of Honor. And as they started, a remarkable thing happened. They started laughing. They started arguing. They started physically experiencing different aspects of the game long before they documented it or created software or rigged a model or laid out a level on the computer. It was literally just moving blocks around and say, hey, check this out. Look at it from this angle. They were having fun experiencing what they were making as part of the process of making it. And it was eye-opening to me. What ended up happening, they ended up getting more and more involved. They ended up designing the entire game in the sandbox. They ended up with a core team of the producer, the lead game designer, the lead layout, the lead environment artist, the lead character designer, and importantly, the lead audio designer. And if anybody knows the Medal of Honor series, one of the hallmarks of that game series is incredible integration of audio with the gameplay. That doesn't happen accidentally. In my experience, you ask most audio designers in the game industry, hey, how's your life going? Oh, you don't want to know. Audio designers too often are brought in at the tail end of the creative process. Here, the audio designer was there right at the moment new ideas and mechanics were conceived of for the game. So they were able to use audio cues and audio texture in a really fundamental way in the game design. So they worked and they worked. They worked out a lot of new game mechanics, new setups, new level layouts. And at the end, instead of a design document, still a very carefully documented game design, but the game document didn't look like that. It looked like that. The entire game was designed in the sandbox, photographed, and then carefully measured and documented like any good game design document. But the whole team had experienced some aspect of every level and every setup before the game was actually built. And I think there's an important lesson there. It's not only about the creative process, but the important precursor to the creative process, which is shared clarity. Shared clarity doesn't come from a document. Clarity comes from back and forth, asking questions, experiencing things together. Clarity is multimodal. Clarity doesn't just happen in your cerebrum with rational ideas. Clarity comes from shared experience, shared visuals, shared physical movement. So that was what we had with Medal of Honor. In the year 2000, Electronic Arts bought DreamWorks Interactive from DreamWorks, and we became EA LA. I was asked to move up to Vancouver to be part of the EA Worldwide Exec team, and had a number of jobs there before eventually becoming EA's Worldwide Chief Visual and Chief Technical Officer. And at that time, we had 14 studios worldwide, almost 3,000 artists and engineers collectively across the whole company. So there are a lot of dimensions to that job. But one thing that kept gnawing at me, which was, we did a lot of games, and EA still, these are the games from that era, EA still does a lot of games. But a question I brought with me to EA is, how do I take that experience from the original sandbox that I had at the painting experience and the experience of the Medal of Honor team, and is there a way to do that at scale? To take that kind of interactive, highly engaged, and very iterative design process, and to do that at scale. And that was how the EA Pre-Pro workshop was born. And this was a workshop that I developed. It was a 2-day workshop. I ended up leading this workshop across EA all over the world and trained a lot of other trainers to do the workshop. And it was basically an intense, very hands-on workshop spent for 2 days for pre-production of games for Electronic Arts. And it was 2 intense but very fun days. We did a lot of different things, including improv theater. This young man here that is not Matt Birch, although it kind of looks like Matt Birch. At this particular point, he is a lorry or a truck. Those aren't his hands, that's fire. I guess I did bring an explosion. There's our explosion right there. He's a lorry on fire, and he's demonstrating a new feature from the video game Burnout. Now, it's silly, it's ridiculous. And especially in the London studio where we did this, people said, I don't know about this improv, we're British. And a couple of people said, hey, I got a PhD at Cambridge, you want me to do what? And the point was always the idea of getting out of your comfort zone to be improvisational or to have fun. It's not just to get people out of their comfort zone, but it's to get them to experience things in the fastest, cheapest, most physical, most social way possible. And those were the key themes for the workshop. I mean, the big ideas were iteration and engagement, but the 4 mantras I always had were fast, cheap, physical, and social. That's what the design process should be in the early stages and probably the later stages as well. So the workshops had very fast pace. Most of the exercises were 15 to 20 minutes. We built a lot of things. We learned by doing. So we built physical prototypes of games. People built things. And that's Will Wright of Sims and Spore there, showing actually a new feature for the Spore game. But we built very fast, cheap prototypes. And we did a lot of exercises, each of which fed into the next. So it was a series of exercises so a team could go through a fast but very low fidelity pre-production process in 2 days. Well, that was them. That was EA. I left EA in 2008, co-founded a venture fund, as Barbara mentioned, and then in 2012 decided it was time to stop working full-time. But then there's my question of, I've had all this experience. I know from experience in my life how hard it is to build great product. It takes incredible work and dedication. And I just made the decision, there was other priorities I had in my life. I wasn't ready to put in that kind of effort anymore. How do I leverage my experience? And my decision was to go out and find companies that were doing the hard work of making great products. So there's 2 VR companies on the top there, Baobab and Nomadic. NORDEUS, who you're going to hear from with Milan. GiftNote, which does really cool kind of blending of top audio tracks and GIFs. And then at the bottom, Achille on the right is a game that is at the game company that will most likely be the first FDA-approved video game. It'll be a game prescription only to treat juvenile ADHD. And their focus is video games that can cure or treat various cognitive conditions. And so I work with them, and then I also do pro bono work for the Neuroscape lab at UCSF, University of California at San Francisco, which is the neuroscience lab that basically creates the core science that Achille is commercializing. And this has really given me a new lease on life, and it's one of the reasons I want to talk about this in particular, is because I so rarely hear people talking about, is there life in this industry after you've decided that you wanted to shift gears? And I realized I just don't think I've ever heard anybody talk about it. And it is kind of taboo. People say, oh, I'm so passionate about this. I'll be working 90 hours a week until the day I die. And there's some people who really believe that, and that's what's right for them. But there's a lot of people who don't. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up. But for me, it's been a great way to leverage my experience and work with young companies. And what do I do with those companies? I give them advice, I act as a sounding board, I do a lot of things. But let's look, for example, at NORDEUS. One of the things I do with NORDEUS, I spent a week out there with them this summer, and not surprisingly, I do the workshops. That I never set out to be a workshopper, but in my life, I've become a workshopaholic. So we did a series of workshops. And the theme is always engagement. You're not seeing anything particularly special happen here other than Post-its, but the idea is to get people out of their desks, out of their offices, and simply treat design and the creative process as an engaged, hands-on team project. Oh yeah, I wanted to show you this one because I think we're going to do a physical prototype. There's Milan right there. Yeah, they're building a physical prototype of a game feature right there. And again, it's silly, it's crude, but it's way less silly than actually building something in software and then figuring out 3 months later, ooh, it's not working out as well as we thought. Better to do it as cheaply and quickly as possible, as silly as it is, and try it out and see if it's fun. We do mind maps. We try to define, like, what is the role of an art director, for example. At NORDEUS, we did exercises on company strategy, on competitive advantages. We just did a whole week of probably 20 different formats of workshops. And going back to this idea of the sandbox, one of the things we talked about was how do we create great sandboxes. For example, this is Andy Norman, one of their executive producers, took literally the idea of I always tell people, think with your body, just make it physical. So he's obviously taking that to heart here. And one of the exercises we did was, this was an exercise to say, what are great creative sandboxes for NORDEUS? The x-axis is how powerful that sandbox might be. The y-axis is how costly or cheap it might be to create that kind of sandbox, but it's really using these exercises to basically define brand new sandboxes for NORDEUS. So those are the kinds of things we do. Now, I don't have to work. I choose my clients carefully for companies that make me feel alive and feel like I'm making a difference and contributing, but also companies that I really love. I love the people. I like what they're doing. I just like being there. Among the many reasons I work at NORDEUS, this picture kind of captures it. These are 3 of the 4 top executives at NORDEUS. There's Milan. Stoya on the right is Chief Technical Officer, and there's 3 co-founders and co-owners. They've never taken outside money. So the 2 guys on the right are co-owners. Tomas on the left is the 4th of the key executive team. They're doing the exercises with everybody else. I heard this from Ed Catmull years ago when he told me about Pixar University. And he told me a lot of things about Pixar University, but he said one of them is, he said, I take the courses. Everybody there takes the courses. And he was telling me about a sculpture class where he took the sculpture class, and I don't know, Jan, you probably know about this because I know you're a sculptor. He said he went into the sculpture class, and he said his stuff just looked idiotic. He's sitting there fumbling around. He didn't know what he was doing, but he was really trying hard to learn. But he said, more than anything he could say, the example of having someone who's at that point in his career and the president of Pixar sitting there struggling with everybody else, willing to do something that he didn't know how to do for the sheer joy and excitement of learning something new, to show that he was able to basically be a rank beginner because learning was more important than feeling that you're the best person in the room. That message really stuck with me, and any company that I work with where the leaders will throw themselves into these exercises and be just as engaged and just as involved as their team really matters to me. It really makes all the difference for me. And my last slide here is they're showing Milan on the floor, hard at work, as engaged as everybody else, driving these workshops through. So what do you do when you're in the older generation? There is a point you say you're at a different point in your life, you're at a different point in your career. Your job's not necessary to make anymore, it's to pass what you've learned on to the people who are making. So on that theme, I will hand the baton over to Milan.
Thanks, Clive. It's going to be tough to follow that. So let me tell you a little bit story about myself. So who knows about what NORDEUS is or what Top 11 is? Okay, a few. Great. So Top 11 is a mobile game. It's the most successful sports game ever in terms of the volumes of players who have played it, who stayed playing it, and who, the money that we have generated from the game. It's best known with, it's one of the oldest games on mobile stores today. It's still running and still amazing. It's 8 years old, and it's kind of the face of the game is Jose Mourinho, who has been a dear friend of ours for many years now. And how the story began is very similar to Glenn's story. Like many creative stories, it's a group of friends working together. And this is us, Branko, a Chief Executive Officer, Stoya, Technical, and me, a Creative Officer. We started as a group of friends trying to make a difference. And then, we got surprised by success, but, we kind of worked hard to earn that. And then the company grew. And then I was like, how to best describe what our company is about. And I could talk about products, I can talk about creative processes. There's not much I can teach most of you guys here about that, but if there's one lesson, it's always about the people. If you're creating a company, you're ultimately creating it to make a difference. And the most difference you're ever going to make is in employees' lives and the lives of your consumers. So just always think about the people. So as a company, we always focus on that, so making our people happy. This is us having fun. So then we grew, and then we grew again. And this was taken maybe a month ago, so this is where the company is currently at. So we're not at Greece right now, but this photo was taken on our team building there in Greece. So we were about 170 people, 20 different nationalities. I had like almost 40 expats living in Belgrade today. So I'm very proud of this bunch of people, great bunch. So what is the story about? I'm gonna give you just a quick intro into what is NORDEUS, how it began, and what are some of the pivotal moments in our careers, and some of the decisions we've gone through. But the overarching theme is a story of learning. As Glenn's theme was, passing his influence and his experience into new ventures and kind of a new creatives, my story is about absorbing that knowledge from him and others great creatives. So what I do believe is what we learn is who we are. So this is a story about learning and what I've learned and what my company learned. A quick disclaimer, there will be no explosions and it is a VFX conference or like computer graphics conference. I'm not a computer graphics guy, but just prepare you for the quality of arts or visuals. So this is kind of visuals that I was very accustomed to in my previous career. I used to be an engineer, so all I did was writing code, and that code was ran to create this, which arguably, even though I worked on it, it was probably the most boring piece of software you could possibly make. It's a very important piece of software, but like it was boring for me personally. So they decided like, oh, man, I need to do something different. I was always a big fan of games and all of that, but like, I really don't know how to make a game. I really wanna, but I don't know how to. So the first lesson is, if you want to start learning, you need to really know what you suck at. So just a lesson of self-awareness. What are we good at? What are we really good at? And what are we really bad at? So, okay, we cannot do graphics. We never design a product. We're about to quit our jobs and start a new venture. So what are we going to do? We quit anyway. So the first guy we hired was a graphics guy. So we pitched him an idea. So we're going to do a football manager game. We're going to do it for Facebook because you really want to play football with your friends. It's a very easy idea. But then like, kind of visualizing that, starting to have first signs of clarity, more than just like a sentence, we needed help. So we hired a guy. So again, the lesson here is, hire people that can complement you. So the first guy we fired is the same guy, because this was shit. And the reason why it was shit was not how it looked like. It was more about, how he delivered it. So let me say, well, we're always going to hire people who make it happen. So who just like go beyond the limits and just get it done and can continue to surprise you. Then we kind of grew further. This is after we released the product, so we upgraded to a Windows office. So there's actually a window here, one. Before that, we were kind of in a kind of garage. And this is the first user test that we ever did. The guy in the jacket is Toma, who I've seen before. He, that day, became our CMO. The guy in green sweater is his current boss. And he was like, oh man, you need to quit. You need to start working for me. This is amazing. So the lesson here is, Toma decided to work for us for no money, for no salary, other than just pure passion. Always try to attract people who are so passionate about your mission, so who believe in your success, because then everything is easy. So what we like to call it in art is like you need to live your passion. I'm living my passion right now. I'm making games. Like it's the coolest job in the world for me. So and then the V-Day is the 9th of May, the day when the World War II ended. And this is like, by just pure coincidence, is the day when we launched. So I call it a V-Day. This was the product that we launched in 2010. And we got surprised. Like we were even checking our servers to see if there are any bugs. But then what happens, like 20 minutes later, the money started pouring in. So it was an immediate success. But the day after, EA, one of the biggest gaming companies in the world, released exactly the same product. It only featured 3D graphics that we didn't have. It featured licensed players and photos of those players. Like how could we possibly compete with that? So it was like a major blow. But I said, okay, well, we're going to just continue. We believe our product is much better. So over the years, we developed a mobile client. So we kind of pushed it into different platforms. We went to be a first cross-platform game back then in 2011. So you can play the same game on multiple devices at the same time. So we're kind of trying to win with technology when we couldn't win with licenses and kind of wallets. And then the one thing happened is one morning, our Toma, the CMO, the guy in the jacket, came and said, I was looking at App Store and all the icons kind of look the same. How about we put a face on our game? That was like, the game was completely stand out then. And hey, that's really cool. And so who should we sign? Well, we should sign the best. Who's the best in the world? Like the best manager, like the people, somebody who everybody knows. So then we decided to sign Mr. Jose. And it was, we started with, we should really sign the best. We tracked him down, found him on a conference, and approached him, and it turns out he's an actually super cool guy. And ever since, we've been working together. Those are one very, very cool moments. So then what that led to was somewhere in 2013, we reached a point where 11 million players were playing our game at the same time. It was quite an achievement, so we felt so proud. But we really did it together, and what we like to call is we conquered together. We found it like this group dynamic where people are working together collaboratively is super, super important for everything that we do. And I think that was a major factor in achieving this. So then we said, well, okay, let's ship another game. Top 11 is the number one, but like we need a number two. So then we made a game that's kind of adjacent to Top 11. It was okay product, but the lesson here was really just kill your games. You really need to admit you made mistakes. You really need to go through those first few quite fast. So just looking back, we should have done it earlier. So don't be afraid to kill your babies, as they say. So then our next big idea was, well, Top 11 is really successful everywhere on the planet, except a few places. One of them is arguably the biggest market at that time for gaming, which is America, US. And why was that? Well, first of all, it's not called football, it's called soccer. That's one factor. So it wasn't the most popular sport back then. But then we figured, what if we marry Top 11 concepts, successful formula, with the most successful American sport? Hey, that must earn billions. And we ended up negotiating with NFL for quite a while, and then the last call, they said, well, you know what, something happened, and we are backing off the negotiations. What? Well, another company just signed the deal with us. What? How can that be? Well, we were just negotiating for like a year. Well, it turns out that Zynga got the deal. And Zynga was arguably at that time the biggest social gaming company in the world, one of the most valued company in games business at least. And what they struggled at the time, conquering the Facebook, conquering all the social games, is how they can map their success into mobile business. And they're really looking into opportunities. I mean, they saw the same opportunities we did. At the same time, they brought in a heavy-hitting executive team. So Don Mattrick was one of the most pivotal executives that EA had in the beginning, a guy responsible for creating FIFA, who basically runs EA even today, Need for Speed, Madden, and those kind of games, the classic EA franchises. Then Clive, the guy in the middle, was a pivotal CMO of EA at that time. Right now, he's currently a CMO of Unity, and was a game maker before that. And then Mark Skaggs was their main creative guy, who I admired a lot by playing all his games avidly. And he was one of the guys that I really look up to and say, well, this guy really created success on PC, on console, on social. He's going to do it on mobile now. So like, what chance do we have against them? The funny thing happened is that at the same time, they've approached us and want to buy us. They say, well, guys, you know what? We really like you, and here's a generous offer. And it was very, very generous. So what we did was we took an executive offsite. This is how executive offsites actually look like. After a few moments with sweet Merceau, we kind of figured out, well, answer to this question, whether we accept the Zynga deal is quite easy. I mean, it's easy for everyone in the world. Like, that's the amount of money that your grandkids could not spend. So it's quite simple. We're going to say no. Right? So it's a very Slavic poster. Why was it easy for us? All we needed to do was take a look into each other's eyes for a few seconds, and then it was obvious. Like, there's one question enough. It was, will this make us happy? So it didn't make us happy. And then there are not many pivotal moments, I guess, in your life, but I do believe that this was one of mine and my friends when we decided to say no. We figured out that what we are really transacting between is our independence for the sake of growing and being better at what you do. Growing as a business, growing as executives, growing as a mindset, as a skill set. So it was very good value proposition, but like it was something message was like I could not really imagine myself losing that independence. So okay, we figured out after so many years what we're all about, and we're just about making people happy. And if this is not making us happy, how can we make other people happy? So it was kind of obvious. What happened in the meantime is we got a lot of respect from guys. Like, these guys don't hear no very often. And it turns out that Clive became a dear friend of ours after that. And we said, if there was one moment I was hesitating about the Zynga offer, it was like I really wanted to work with people like Don and Clive. They're such an amazing creative, such an amazing individual. I could learn so much. Is there a way that I can learn but still have happiness and independence? And it turns out that there is a way. So Clive, in 2015, became our board advisor. So, and I'm going to talk about what that means for us. So I do remember, like, the first day that he landed in Belgrade to visit the studio and see, what we're all about, he made a few interesting observations. So one was that, you guys are kind of the opposite company. What do you mean, Clive, by that? Well, many companies struggle with engineering, struggle with financing, they have money, they have a lot of creative energy, they have a lot of creative people, but you guys have amazing engineers, you guys have amazing financials, and but just like something didn't really click. And you remind me of a studio called Pandemic, and that was like this is the most Clive or most British way you can receive a feedback. So like you remind me of this amazing company, but what he really meant was this company, this amazing EA studio, ran off after their first success to create 3 different successes. And they bankrupt because of that. So then we just look around us. So there were 7 new products that we were trying to launch at the same time with 100-something people. And like, okay, we need to do something. So I do believe that Clive saved our ass right there and then, just saying that one very British sentence, like, you remind me of somebody who went bankrupt. And then what happens next is he introduced us to so many amazing individuals. So like, I'm sure many of you know some of the faces here. So Evan Hirsch, I became a very dear friend with him. He helped me a lot with setting up design and creative processes at the company. He was one of the execs at the EA before. So he helped me interview and hire Daryl in the top right corner, who later became the head of arts at NORDEUS. And he was very passionate about learning as well. So when he did, in one of the sessions, he brought Henry LaBounta, who I'm sure you're going to see present at the View in a few days, who later told me that his personal mentor is Glenn, and Glenn is amazing. So, okay, I need to meet Glenn. So then that was kind of the connection. In the end, we got to kind of have this amazing network of people who we worked on pretty regularly. So it's not like, oh, I met a guy. We just spend a lot of time together building amazing products and creating some amazing decisions. So then what we managed to do is we kept our happiness, and we actually got all these people really helping us on the mission. So I like to call this chapter like, stretch yourself. Is what we call about learning. Like, you cannot really learn if you're not in the zone of discomfort. Like, you really need to be stretched. So what happened? What are the results? So we had some games in pre-pro, and then you can see them on the left the way they looked like. So this is the most computer graphic I will do today. They were fun games, fun prototypes, but they kind of lacked something, and that we kind of didn't know. But like, we just say, hey, Daryl, go fix that. And after a year, we got the games to look amazing as they did on the right. What else we did in the meantime is, to Clive's observation, like, you guys need to figure out what's your problem today. And then we identified our biggest problem is we're in Belgrade. And we said, why is that? In Belgrade, we kind of hired everyone. Being in Belgrade is amazing for the sake of you can just pick and choose any talent that you want locally. But we need worldwide experts for the kind of ambition that we are setting ourselves to. I said, well, I don't think that's your problem. So another words of wisdom from Clive, he says, like, all you need to do is get everybody into Belgrade. So, but how are we going to do that? Everybody tried it, everybody failed. Well, yeah, but just find a person who did it and just bring that person to Belgrade. I think that was a very key advice. What we were planning to do back then was we should open up a London studio, we should open a San Francisco studio, we should open on just spreading around the world and getting the talents to kind of work for us. But that was not really working at NORDEUS in Belgrade. So I think that was another case when Clive saved our ass. At one point we were running a London studio, we were running another studio in Macedonia, and it didn't really work out. We just burned a lot of cash. So then we changed our strategy and said, well, you know what, we're gonna stay in Belgrade, because Belgrade is an awesome location, just people haven't figured it out. So we brought in Caroline, and Caroline used to be a chief people officer at Jet.com in a super amazing startup. They went public, or got acquired by Walmart, I guess. And before that, she was a VP of Amazon in Europe. So it was quite skilled with people processes and people cultures. So we brought her to Belgrade. She moved her whole family with her. It was a lot of stress in her personal life, but she helped us achieve this amazing mission. And as you see on the graph on the right is the amount of expats that we currently have in Belgrade. It's just like exponential. So we have more and more and more expats coming in, and all of them are experts in the field. All of them are kind of the best minds that we found. So Belgrade is really an awesome place. And like what I'm telling you is Belgrade, Belgrade, Belgrade. I think there's a lot of parallels to be drawn between Torino and Belgrade. Torino is an amazing city, and like you don't really need to go anywhere else. Like you can start building everything here. It is hard. You need to build a culture around you. You need to build an industry around you. But it's one hell of a mission. So what we did, like with collecting all these lessons, is we kind of proceeded in looking into future. So I wanted to kind of share these stories because these are the stories that led us to our success. Hopefully, our stories for the future will also turn out to be successful. But like, who knows? what we're doing right now is a bunch of these together with Glenn. So he had a photo of me sitting down and writing on the wall, so I needed to kind of get back to him. So what we are doing right now is we're testing this new hypothesis, which is not really a hypothesis, but like, collective brain is always superior to individual minds. But how can we turn that into a culture, company culture? How can we make more of our creative process collaborative and social? How can we function as a collective brain? And there's a few things that you need to really think about. Is like, how do you really, build all those relationships that do exist in your brain? How do you map all of that? How do you share vision across many people? How do you restore, previous memories? How do you keep track of your long-term memory and things like that as a collective? What is the most efficient way? So this is what we're working on right now. It might be no-brainer for many of the seniors in the audience running companies, but like this is the chapter where we are really at. And to kind of sum up, why are these lessons so important to us? Why we always look back at understanding what are the things that do work well and what are the things that don't? Is because the lessons that I told you are basically the company's values today. The key Zynga moments at the top is like, this is why we exist as a company. We want to make people happy. Like, I want to be happy working at my company, so I want every employee to be happy, and happier than anywhere else. I want my consumers to be happy as well. And like the stories, like the 4 stories, like stretch yourself, come together, make it happen, and live your passion, are values that we use every day to drive decisions. Like, who do we hire? What kind of process do we need to implement? Do we need to fire somebody? Like, those are kind of like really getting used today, and all of them are based on our lessons. So it's really important that you learn as a creative. All the speakers that I've met yesterday have something in common, which is they're endlessly learning. And if you really want to be an amazing creative, I think like you need to be forever learning. So thank you all very much.